Hey, everybody. This is the Helping Friendly Podcast. We are coming to you live on Friday afternoon. Got those Friday vibes. Brian, you got Friday vibes?
I got big time Friday vibes right now.
Megan, you just got back from a trip. Were you rushing home so that you didn't miss this amazing opportunity to talk to us?
Yes, although my Friday was on Wednesday because I had 2 days off for the Jewish holidays. So I've had Friday vibes for a few days, guys. But
Yeah, same with
yes.
my kids. Thank
Mhm.
thank God. God, it's so
Oh, they've
great.
been off too.
2 days.
Yeah. Yeah, it's a lot. But yeah, I got back. I got back with enough time to work out, shower, and get ready to podcast with you guys. And I thought we were
Yeah,
going on at 4. So I also had time to read. It's
that's
great.
awesome.
Yeah,
That's luxurious, really.
it really was. Yeah.
Uh,
The
um
4-hour drive from DC was not super luxurious, but it was
Not super
fun.
luxurious.
Mm.
I want to say real quick, there's like so much hurricane relief stuff happening all around the country, and I'm not gonna like tell people what they should or shouldn't do, but one of our friends who is a founding member of Fans for Racial Equity and a friend of the pod, he's been on several times. Malcolm, he is in Florida. His whole house was totally destroyed, and he is now like kind of screwed. I'm gonna put the link in the show notes to his GoFundMe. He's a good dude. He does a lot for the fish community, and I think if you're looking to like help a fellow fish fan, I'm going to put the link in the chat too, in case people want to check that out. Again, I know so many people are in need right now, and really like, things have been destroyed and people are in uncertain situations. But this is a close friend who has done a lot for the fish community, so check that out. But I know there's lots of other charities who are trying to do what they can to get people water and food and things they need, which is crazy.
Wow, that's really sad. I didn't know that about Malcolm's situation. That's really sad. And I've been talking with Brian Harding from Film, and he is with a bunch of people organizing some benefit concerts down in North Carolina and the surrounding area. So as we get information about those and they are kind of solidified, I will definitely push those out, and HF Pod will as well.
Definitely good stuff to support. It's a
Yeah.
lot of really amazing creative people down there, and just horrible destruction throughout the entire region.
Yeah, really sad. And we're thinking about everyone down there. Asheville, obviously a huge music city, and a lot of people that we all know down there. So sending our vibes out to you, and lots of former guests of HF Pod in the Asheville area. So we're thinking about you guys. Um, One quick thing, I want to ask people to send us reviews because we really want your reviews. We want you to tell us what you think, especially if it's good, maybe only if it's good. I feel like things are going to be, you know, I feel like this is going to be a really intense fall, Brian. We got a lot of sports happening. We got a lot, so we're going to keep the 20 minutes of nonsense at the beginning. Try to keep it to a minimum, but when there's playoff baseball and college football and there's Premier League. I mean, there's so much stuff to talk about, and that's just sports. That doesn't even get into books and movies and other things. So I don't to give us reviews, but just remember that we're just trying to, you know, we're just trying to be we're just trying to be good hosts, and tell you guys what we think about everything, not just fish.
This is our weekly hang with our friends,
Yeah.
and
Exactly.
we have an agenda, and we will get to the agenda. But it's very important that you all allow us the time to hang. And I will just say, I don't ever mean to correct you in any way, RJ, because I think that you are, all knowing in some cases and have given me some of the best advice of my entire life. But I would be open to the critical reviews, because the critical reviews provide learning opportunities, but also opportunities to rib at our listeners and realize that maybe we know more than people, and maybe you're complaining about things that aren't going to get fixed, like the way that people pronounce certain words, or the way that people approach listening to music. We're here for all views. Well, most views.
Most.
If we're gonna talk about like Flat Gamehenge or something like that, I don't want to hear from you. But most views we're open to.
It's hard. I mean, I feel like now I understand how people get annoyed with, your band, your favorite band. You go to see them at at wherever, and it's like 30 minutes after the ticket time, and you're like, where are these guys? But that's what we just happened to us because we were just hanging out and catching up on stuff. You know?
It's true. That's probably what they're doing backstage. They're like hanging
Yeah.
out. They're like, "Oh my god, did you guys see like what happened at my hear about what happened at my job, or did you
Yep.
want to hear about my weekend?" Like they're just backstage catching up, you know?
What happened to
Yeah,
my
and
job that I'm about to go and do? I haven't clocked in yet. Is that what you're talking about?
Yeah, exactly.
I
Maybe
hijacked
it
it to
doesn't
talk
work.
about work, and Megan. We didn't even hear about Megan's trip yet, which we will. You know, we got a lot to learn about and talk about. Megan, we have a reprise show coming up in Albany. I'm saying that we do because I hope that you can come. But Albany,
I
November
feel like I don't have
2nd.
a choice, to be honest. I feel like
Well,
I don't have a
you
choice
always
about
have a
this.
choice.
I'm
You
just
always have a
kidding.
choice.
I'm super
Um,
excited and I'm choosing to go and I can't wait to go and I can't wait to see you and to see everybody up there. It's gonna be so fun. I haven't seen a show in Albany in a really long time. So I hope other people come on
Same.
November 2nd.
November 2nd. We if you go to repriseband.com, you will see a link for tickets. I just got a text from the band. We are going to be announcing 4 more shows next week. So
Sick,
Oh
dude.
my God, that's
there's more
awesome.
stuff happening. This all happened like in the last hour. I don't really even know what's happening, but we're going to find out soon. Um, Also, we asked you guys to leave voicemails and you did. And now I don't know if we have
Yes.
time for them.
I
But
think we can do at least
Yeah,
one.
we
How
have
about we just do one?
okay, should we do one? Okay.
let's do
Yeah.
it.
Um,
Mhm.
all right. Now you guys are putting me on the spot. I mean, not really because I brought it up, but
I will say while you're holding out,
yes, please.
uh, you're absolutely right. It's going to be an intense fall. There's a lot going on. I will say from a sports standpoint, my favorite sport month of the entire year is October. You
Definitely.
get you know what's happening in the NFL. You know who the series teams are, who the hilarious teams are that you can just laugh at and mock, like the Eagles and the Jets right now.
Disagree.
I mean, you should have watched the Eagles game from last week if you wanted to disagree. You get the EPL is starting to heat up. We're getting into great matches here. Plus, Champions League is happening. The NBA and the NHL are about to return, which is just this like period filled with wonder and hope if you're a Sixers fan, and just like bleak dread if you're a Chicago Bulls fan. But with baseball, you get the sport that is stretched out over the whole year, and everybody spends 6 months being like, "Oh, cool, baseball's on. It's just always on." Blah, blah, blah. And then you get these games that, like, every single pitch is the most intense, stress-inducing, in the best way possible experience of your entire life, and the entire stadium is going for 9 innings, and then you get moments like, well, I should say, some years October does not fully live up to itself. It's great, but it doesn't fully live up to itself. Right now, we are living up to what October should be from a baseball standpoint. And last night, the Mets come back in Milwaukee with Boog Sciambi on the microphone, calling the game. Cubs play-by-play guy getting to watch the Brewers get knocked out in the park formerly known as Miller. Like, I was in the back of an Uber watching the game, losing my mind. The Uber driver was like, "You okay?" And I was like, "Dude, the Mets are gonna win." And he was like, "Oh, okay, cool." And I was like, "No, you don't understand." And then my phone started blowing up. It was incredible. So we're in for it. We're in
Yeah.
for it.
What a game. Jeez. That was just unbelievable. That whole thing. Anyway, we can keep moving because if we start talking about baseball, things are going to get
I mean, I know that you're required by law to hate the Mets, but like you have to at least appreciate Pete Alonso. He would be a good Philly. I'm sorry,
He
Dave
would.
Goldstein. I'm right here. He has that vibe to him, and that was the biggest moment of his entire career thus far last night. That was so sick.
It was so great. And I watched the whole game and like the build up to it, the Brewers hit 2 solo home runs in the 7th and it was back to back pitches, back to back at bats, like just one pitch, then one pitch. And the place was just going absolutely nuts. Like it was, for 2 innings until the top of the 9th, everyone was just like, it's happening. We're moving on. I mean, it was just, I could not believe that top of the 9th, 3-run homer. Unbelievable.
Chicago already gets 2 baseball teams. We never asked for a third, and just with the way that housing has been built up between the northern suburbs of Chicago and the southern suburbs of Milwaukee, it's more and more Chicago North, and we just don't need another team. Just we can get rid of that team and we can move on. It'd be okay.
I feel like Rob from Supermoon Brewing is going to disagree with you.
Well, he's back in Chicago and he's a Cubs fan, so he would agree with me.
Oh, he's back in Chicago.
Yeah,
Jeez.
yeah.
Unbelievable. Okay, guys, we will
This
listen
is
to a
like when you
voicemail
guys
in a
talk about
second.
baseball, it
Yeah.
feels like when I'm
I
in
know
a room
Meg is just like sitting there, like
dad
smiling and
and
like,
my
okay,
brother.
what is this gonna happen?
I feel
Sorry.
like I'm in a room with my dad and my brother, and I'm like, I'm missing some sort of chromosome here to like do this or something. I'm like slowly just like walk out of the room and like go get something else.
But I think
how I
Megan,
feel.
what,
Enjoy listening to you guys talk about baseball.
but
though.
don't you think like if you were watching that game with me or Brian last night, it's really it's a drama that's playing out before your eyes. Like if you're like these people, I mean, what,
No, I would
30,000,
love it.
40,000
I would
people,
love
like
that.
they're all their hearts were just completely crushed in an instant. I mean, it's just crazy.
Yeah, I mean, I think like the closest you can get to like loving a band is loving sports. Like I think that's the closest you can get. And there's that kind of like sense of deep community and like a knowing, like if you're wearing like there's like a micro love between people. If you're wearing like a sports team and you see someone wearing that, there's a sense of like knowing a little bit about who that person
Oh
is.
yeah.
And I feel like that's the same with like Fish and Dead. When I see people like wearing those things, I'm like, there's a little bit of you that I like. And I think there's a lot of that like in relation to sports. So I love listening
Yeah.
to you guys talk about it. I just don't have the knowledge to be like involved in the conversation, but I would love to go to a game with either one of you or watch a game with you and be excited about it. And, you know, I love hot dogs. I like beer. You know, I'm perfect to take to a game.
You are.
You like the drama and the romance of things and the weight of history, and baseball
Yes.
provides it. I mean, to your point, our great listener Chad Carter has joined us again. He is a Cubs fan as well. He's also a Manchester City fan. I know, without
Sorry
ever
about that.
having met him, that there are aspects of our personalities that we would completely align on and aspects of our
Yeah.
personality that we would completely disagree on. And then there'd be this like middle ground where we'd find, some agreement and disagreement on other issues. But those two, it's like you just know. It's good
Yeah, I
stuff.
love
Yep.
that.
I just want to say that it's Friday, tomorrow's Saturday. Tomorrow we have 4 division series games. There's baseball all day.
Nicholas, I'm hoping the same happens soon.
We're getting
I'm
there,
with you.
Nicholas. I'm sorry.
Uh,
I'm sorry. We got a lot to talk about today. It's summer '94, but
I
yes, there
know,
are 4
fuck.
baseball games tomorrow. There are 2 on
Brian
Sunday.
and I
It's
will
a great
start
time.
a separate podcast that's just the Fish fans talking about sports, which is just an extension of this.
Ooh, people have been asking for that for a while.
Do it.
I'm gonna have to I'm gonna actually have to move one of my TVs into another room because Ohio State plays at 3:30 and the Phillies play at 4, and it's gonna be madness.
Too
Okay,
much.
I understand this.
Megan, 1994, summer 1994, ranked number 9 by us and number 6 by fans. So we demoted it slightly, but we can talk about why it's ranked where it is. But do you want to say anything about summer 94?
Yeah, I think it's really important to briefly kind of set the stage. We talked a lot about this in our 40 for 40 episode, but I just want to remind people that 94 was the 7th year in a row that this band played over 100 shows in a year. That's just insane. Also, you've got Hoist coming out. This tour is the first of 2 full country loops they're going to do. So the first in the spring, summer, the next in the fall. And this tour, even though it's on its own, is actually the second half of a full kind of tour with the spring tour. So it's almost 3.5 months they've been on the road by the end of this tour. And it's just crazy. Like this is the year they cover their first, musical costume for Halloween. They play MSG for the first time. You've got the hot dog gag at New Year's Eve. Like this is just such a banner year for the band. And this tour that we're talking about today is 29 shows, 118 jam chart entries. So 4.06 jam charted jams per show, which is really high. I'm never going to be able to say that and sound like normal while I say it. It's Charlie's fault.
No, we should just say whatever we want and not worry about it.
I
I
know,
say we I
but
say we throw it all out.
I'm gonna throw it all out. But I do think it's interesting because if you think about it, like Winter '03 has been the highest so far at 4.88, but that tour is, I mean, is half as long as this one, less than half even. And we also have 61 debuts this year. And I was thinking about that. Like, obviously, that includes the White Album and a bunch of bluegrass songs, but has there ever been a band that's debuted 61 songs in a year? I'd like to know if there is been another band because just thinking about learning that many songs and performing them live in a year is pretty crazy.
It is wild because it's almost we think of this new songs inform Fish as a modern
Mm,
idea, and it's kind of always been there outside of like a gap in the late 90s and early 2000s and the early 3.0 era, this like 10-year period in time. Outside of that, it's been pretty normal for Trey to be like, we are learning new songs, incorporating them into our style, and that is how, and then we're just gonna like play a ton of stuff and experiment and mess with things. But that the introduction of new songs seems to change things a lot.
which is kind of weird because when you listen to this tour, you hear a lot of the same songs. And it's funny that Justin Bruce said this because when I was thinking about this prepping, I was like, the only band that would probably do this is King. It's like they're literally the only band that would probably do something as weird as that. But yeah, it's
And this
weird.
is kind of Fish's King. Like if you were to make the
Right.
comparison between the two bands, this is where you hear the most King Gizzard in Fish.
Hmm.
I think
I
so. Like a wild, careening, free, just huge energy,
Humor,
relentless. Yeah. Like,
energy, just like
mhm.
careening down a roller coaster that actually might come off the tracks, and you don't know if you're going to be safe at the bottom, and you're kind of in for it that much more.
I know.
I
This
got a
feeling.
I got another I got a young band comparison for later. Okay, so
Ooh. Oh, foreshadowing.
Really, just like dangling that out
see
there.
guys, this is what we this is it's called yeah, it's just called entertainment. Um so Megan, I think this is like a little bit of an arbitrary tour because they just played like 2 weeks before this.
Yeah.
So like they basically didn't stop the whole year like you were saying. But the spring tour was super long and which we know about, but I think like what's interesting to me about this tour is like of course there's like the high energy, it's precise, the set lists are awesome, the debuts, all that. But the most interesting thing to me is like the small steps forward that they make with improv, which I think we'll talk about.
Mm,
But I feel like you can like hear that in just in the course of this tour, partially because like so many of the jams are like the same songs. So you can
yeah.
like track, between the 500 versions of Split Open and Melt, you can hear like a little bit of of evolution. But what what about what's like what did you hear, Megan, in terms of your like the sound or just the themes in terms of the music?
It's interesting that you say that because I totally hear that, especially now that you bring it up like small steps. For me, what's really interesting about this tour is that it's, there's like this athleticism and this artistic virtuosity to the band that's probably at like its peak.
Hmm.
And in terms of like ability, speed, dexterity, and you think about like that's what like 1993 is, right? Like they're just so tight and fast and they've kind of perfected this show and it's like this encapsulation of what they do best. And then you think about like what's next for them. This weekend, my daughter and I were at an art museum and we were talking about art. And I was telling her about Picasso's museum in Barcelona. And the way that it's set up is that it starts out chronologically. And so you see that like when he was a teenager, he painted the masters. And by like 17, he could paint like a master. And so then it's kind of like, what do you do next? And I think that's kind of
Hmm.
like what Fish was at. So that's when Picasso started to experiment with cubism and broke the form and started to develop this whole new idea about what you could do in art and painting. And I feel like that's what Fish is doing here. They're stretching. We have this thing that works so well and that's so tight and so fast and so good. Like, what's next? What's different? What's outside this mold? How can we do that within the framework of what we have? And the other thing about this tour that's really interesting to me is this is and I wanted to ask you guys what you think, because maybe I've kind of forgotten something, but I feel like this is the last tour that's really steeped in like storytelling and Fish lore. You have
Mm.
2 full Gamehenge performances in this tour. There's no other tour that does that. You have 3 Harpuas and an Iculus. Just one of any of that at Mondegreen would have been awesome, but like on this tour, it's just like covered in storytelling and joy. This is the last like secret set stuff or secret language stuff. There's just a lot of old school fishiness that they're about to kind of let go of. So I think
Mm.
that it's just an interesting point to think about what was changing for them this year and what they were going to hold on to and what they were going to let go of.
I think you made some really outstanding points. I have almost the exact same takeaways. Just I'll give a slightly different approach to it. But I think one thing that I was thinking about as we were starting this is, yes, there is a natural comparison between spring and summer. And if this was 1993, spring and summer would be the same length of tour, that spring tour that we did in winter 93. And I think it would be almost impossible for us to do. Like we're starting to get to a point with Fish where if they're going to play a 3-month long tour, it is almost impossible to cover all of that in a single episode. There's just so much. And there are
Yeah.
2 competing sounds and styles. And we'll hear as we get to, there are 2 3-month tours that we will cover, hint hint, in the future here of this series. Both of them kind of ramp up towards the end. They operate a little bit differently than spring tour or summer tour do here, where we get a lot more up front. But I think as I was listening to this might be the most Fish tour ever. Like
Yeah.
pure Fish in its, if you wanted to play for someone what Fish sounds like, I feel like you would choose a show like 618 or 622 or even 7/8 where you have a Gamehenge. It really sparks, or it speaks to that nostalgia is starting to emerge for the storytelling aspect of um, Nectar's and of Fish's origin and the kind of whimsical aspect of their music and the mythology that they had created. You can kind of tell that they know this is the last time that they're going to be able to do this, that they're booking venues where it's just not going to be applicable to do a full Gamehenge set for people, or when they do it almost 30 years later, it's going to require a different model of telling the story than it did here in the early 1990s. You also get this, and Meg, you talked about this, like they're almost, because they're realizing that is phasing out. That is no, like the jokes, the big ball jams, that like need for audience connection in 1,000-person theater, the storytelling, that is fading away from who Fish will be, but they are finding kind of their own key to long-term evolution. And I think the one thing that, because this is a great tour, the thing that prevents it from being higher in my mind is that the evolution of what's to come is what is going to make this all special. And I'll talk a little bit more about that when we get to our big takeaways, but like this is not the end point for Fish, and that is very, very important in their long story. Like this is a peak moment that they move on from within 4 months. But within that, you get this kind of, they figure out where humor meets terror, meets brilliance, meets experimentation. This is a band that is starting to realize that the moments that are really special at their shows and that they will ultimately connect the most with their fans on and with a mass audience on are improvisational moments. And so there are hints here. We're not getting the big 40-minute jams that we'll get in 5 months, but we are starting to hear hints of where that band is going to go. And we are starting to wave goodbye. Like I've always been told that 7/8 show from Great Woods felt like a send off to the Northeast and like a send off to old school Fish, that it was like, thank you all for what you did for us for the last 10, 11 years. We are now going to change, without overtly saying this. But it kind of has the same impact of, some people are going to hate me for this, but whatever. I'm sorry if you don't have a soul. At the end of the Joshua Tree tour, Bono said, we're going to go away for a while and we're going to dream this all up again. And he knew that U2 had reached the end of something. And when they reemerged, they were a completely different band in Berlin. And they were a band that, figured out a new style and a new sound to drive them forward. And while Phish doesn't make as dramatic of a sonic change until 1997, they're definitely a different band by the time we hear them in June 1995. And they're interested in things that are pushing them in a very, very different direction than what has gotten them here.
Yeah, and then U2 came back with the best U2 album of all time. They came back and they did it. All right. So
the most important album I've ever heard in my entire life. That's for another podcast, but no album has changed. Do you want a quick digression? Just like a very quick one?
Nope.
Okay.
I do have a question about this, though, not about you two, but I have a question about, do you think we underrated this? Like, so there are two tours in our top 10 that are not in the listener top 10. There are two. And one of them is a lot lower. And I'm wondering how they're going to sound in context of those tours. But I'm curious because I think those are the two tours that would have been bumped for this.
I think one of those was a must stay. I think the other one will be a slightly more challenging argument to make simply because it is there, because IMO has to be there because it represented a huge step forward for the band.
Yeah. Well, we're about to find out. We're going to find out next week about one of them.
But I don't think we underrated this one. I think that this one is very much of like there are some of everyone's favorite shows that they will ever hear are on this tour. But also when you do a full tour deep dive, as we will talk about, you get a bit sameness on the jamming, which that thing, like that criticism that we've made repeatedly, will go away for the top tours of this.
Yeah, that's like what's really interesting, I think, is that like anything that's made it to the top 10, I would think it's because of the jams. But then like this tour, I don't think that's it. Like there's so many other things that play into why this tour is where it is.
Brian, I'm sorry for denying you the digression, but it's only because I agree with you. It's the top 5 most important albums for me. So, like if I disagreed with you, I would think we should spend 10 minutes on it, but you're right.
It'll be for our bonus episode.
All right. I think we should listen to one voicemail from someone who was at the tour opener, which feels appropriate as we start to talk about our don't miss jams, and then we're going to talk about our shows of the tour. Brian, are you sad that I shot down your digression?
I'm excited for the voicemail.
Okay. I feel bad now.
I'm going to figure out a way to throw it in here without your approval. Okay. I'm no longer going to ask for approval here, but
that was your mistake.
Oh my God.
Hey, how you guys doing? RJ, Brian, Meg. It's Bryce here. And I just thought I'd tell you a little bit about a show you probably won't talk about this week. You're doing the summer tour 94, right? So I saw the show at the Triad Amphitheater in Salt Lake City, a little known venue, about 3,000 people. It was the tour opener, and only one of 3 concerts there ever, apparently, so they say. The Wallflowers played there, Stone Temple Pilots, the Meat Puppets in Jawbox, and Phish.
Wow.
Crazy.
93, 94, apparently. It was like a paved plaza among office buildings. Kind of weird. Kind of felt like you were downtown. But it was kind of small, although the buildings made it feel kind of big. And it was still bigger than the largest show I'd seen up until that point, which had been an old gymnasium in Maine, the Portland Expo.
Amazing.
Yeah.
500 people in Mabel. I don't know, something like that. Anyway, back to
tour opener 93.
June 1994. They should have played Simple Among Those Sax Scrapers. And what is a little known fact about the show, apart from the ripping play-in by Trey Anastasio in Maze and Down with Disease in particular, and also Melt, was that Trey, I think for the first set only, wore a leather jacket. And it was really weird.
Sick.
As a rock star. And yeah, so it was kind of interesting that way, but it kind of felt like, whoa, this band's really on the rise. They're going to be wearing leather jackets all the time. Anyway, yeah. So he had this angular machine gun kind of thing at times going on with the guitar. And Hoist hadn't impressed me too much. I still preferred the live experience much more from this band. It's only one of 2 shows for me that year. Only one of the summer, and then it rocked and it ripped, and it was probably because that leather jacket. All right, let's meet up in Albany. Peace out.
That's
All right.
amazing.
That was good. I just want to fact check myself. I said that the Portland Expo was the first show of 1993, and that was right, Brian.
2/3/93,
Yeah,
baby
the
grand
only time they've
debut.
ever played there. Okay.
Top opener.
I thought that with the new piano,
Mhm.
beautiful. It's a beautiful sound. I think the
Any more
six-
fact checks you'd like to present about yourself being right?
No, I was told there
When
would
you
be
said
no
you were going to fact
fact-checking.
check yourself, I thought you were going to like say you were wrong, but you're like, no, I'm fact checking to let you know I was indeed right. I think you don't
So-
need to fact check if you're right.
It's
I
the
think it
most
just
right.
sets up.
It's the most right-wing fact check ever.
Some
Right?
people might be wondering. Some people might be wondering because they might be wondering if I still got it. Okay.
You still got it.
All right. Let's go for a notable jam. There's 500 shows on this tour, so let's go for some notable jams because we can't go through every show. We just can't. Although I do think the 6ix9ine opener is pretty good and they sound really good, but they didn't really even stop spring tour. This is just like the next show kind of.
Yeah.
It is funny because they'll do kind of the same thing in fall '95, where they'll stop after Halloween for 10 days, but we consider that all fall tour.
Yeah.
I don't know. Like there's, I think it
Yeah,
was the right
true.
move here, but
Megan, what is one of your top 5 notable jams from this tour?
It's really funny because when I was trying to pick out jams for this tour, listening back and picking the ones, I was kind of disappointed that a lot of the jams that I were picking were kind of obvious. There's not as many kind of like secret, exciting
Definitely.
jams that you don't know about in here, which is a little bit interesting. Like a lot of the jams that I really loved were from the shows that have been released.
yes,
Which is just, you know what I mean?
they've
Like,
done a
which is
good
kind of
job of
like
this year.
they really have. Like they've done so many. And so of course, like I think probably my favorite jam of the whole tour is the Bowie from Chicago on 6/18. It's just it's just the perfect Bowie. It's like 18 minutes. I mean, I know you have a Bowie you like better, RJ, but this is that kind of like perfect go everywhere and anywhere jam, completely untethered, really strong and big in the first part. And then the second part is so delicate. And just like when Trey finds that like sweet little riff, like buried underneath it and unearths it, it's great. It gets dark again, it builds and builds and builds. Like I think this is like a perfect 1994 summer tour Bowie. And there's a bunch of them.
I think this is the best Bowie before the best Bowie ever. This
Yeah.
is the best Bowie to date, I think. And I actually maybe that's not true, but it's up there. But then we're 6 months from the champion of all David Bowies.
We're gonna
but
get the
it, like-
Fox Bowie. I think it's Fox. And
Yeah,
then we're gonna get there's one, or no, it's sorry, it's the Betsy DeVos Bowie, and then there's the Minneapolis Bowie, the Tim Walls.
Megan was at
Bowie.
the DeVos.
She was
Yeah.
at the
Were you?
DeVos
It's-
Bowie.
Yeah.
Yeah.
That was my first show. Yeah.
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 It's your
That was
first
my
show.
first show.
That's a killer
Mhm.
Bowie, and then
I
there's
love that
the
Bowie.
Minneapolis one, which is 37 minutes, and then, but I would argue neither of those are as strong as Providence, because Providence is one of those, like, there's no notes missed.
Yeah.
They somehow figure out a way to incorporate Harry Hood into the middle of David Bowie. They terrify the entire audience. This is like still, this Chicago Bowie is like the dream of 4.0 Bowies. Like if we could just do
100%.
this,
Yes.
holy crap, what a
Yes.
porthole we've opened.
It doesn't have to be. This is only 18 minutes. It's not like this goes for 35 minutes. Like
Yeah.
we can get here. Like we can definitely get here. But yes,
But
I agree.
I think what you're pointing out though is important, and I think like the fully major key in a minor key jam thing like didn't happen that much. And here we're like, it's very emotional for several minutes, and I think that's what's most interesting to me about the Providence Bowie is how that evolves out of like the madness. But I feel like this is a version of that. It's pretty amazing. Still an all-timer, you know?
It is.
It's also a period, and we get a lot of these throughout this tour, where the really great jams are about 18, 19 minutes long.
Yeah.
We are not off the rail, we're not off the rails yet. We're still kind of cooking with the same formula that worked in August. That really kind of steps out of the of like the confines of a jam and of a song. It's definitely type 2, but it's not what we're going to get in November, where the band is going to be like, we don't really care about your well-being in the audience. We are going to do whatever the hell we want to do on stage for 40 minutes. And either you're along for the ride or you're not, but like, we're going to do it. And they're not there yet. Like, there's still like this second set in Chicago is still probably like 6 or 7, 8 songs, something like that. There's
Yeah.
still some filler in there, but it does flow really nicely. And it is anchored by a Bowie that is just spot on in terms of, pushing the envelope just enough.
Yeah. Brian, what's the top 5 jam of the tour for you?
The Marat Antelope is probably my favorite jam of the whole tour. When I think about the sound of this tour, I think about energy, tightness, and brilliant speed jamming, combined with the emergence of slowed down and immersive exploration. You kind of get this back and forth within that 19 minute. But then Fishman, in like every great jam, going, yeah, at some point, there's a lot of yelling and a lot of like, they sound like they're surfing. I'm totally here for it. But you get it really nicely in this Marat Antelope. I mean, we're 10 months past the Marat Gin, one of the most revolutionary jams of the year. When I say that we're like cooking with the themes of that month, like the Marat Gin sounds like it could have been played at, in some ways in June still, like we haven't moved that far beyond it. And this Antelope kind of matches that idea that let's break down what's happening within a song and add a bunch of weird sounds and riffs and fast ideas and maybe a theme and some screaming, and maybe a tease of like a song. And then we're going to figure out our way back to Antelope. But within there, you're going to feel like you ran a marathon.
That jam is so wild. It's interesting that you said you felt like it's like they're surfing, because I kept coming up with that like theme when I was listening to this, but I decided against it ultimately. Well, okay, so I'll explain my thinking. At first, I was like, 1994 summer kind of feels like that moment when you're on a surfboard and you like, it's so hard to like actually stand up and ride a wave. And when you finally do it, it feels like for a moment you could stay there forever and it's effortless, but it's like you're rushing and there's a lot of like forward momentum too. But then I decided it was too like peaceful of a metaphor for this tour, because this tour is so just like relentless. Like, you know what I mean? Like I just couldn't, I don't know. I was like, I think it works in this idea of like this mastery of craft and an effortlessness that when you're on top of that. But I just was like, there's such a careening, like freewheeling feel to this tour that I felt like it wasn't good for balancing. I don't know. That's a really long way of saying that. I also thought about that metaphor.
Surfing. Okay. I'm gonna go chronological here, just because I don't know what else to do. But yeah, sort of. But I kind of want to jump to one of the end ones, but I'll save it. Or should I just go to the end ones because it's more fun?
That's where I'm gonna go next too.
Okay, episode 3 of the Helping Friendly podcast. Episode 3 was on the 7/3/94 show from Old Orchard Beach. If you've been to Maine, you know where Old Orchard Beach is. If you don't worry about it, because it's the only time the Fish has ever played there, at the ballpark, which is so great. The Bowie from this show is just, it's a really good show, but they get into this like almost like really kind of intense but repetitive groove that's a really different kind of jam, and it's really like it's a really different and interesting take on Bowie to me, and I really enjoyed it. I don't know if you guys noted that one or listened to it, but it's kind of a different kind of sound that really like hit me, especially as you're going through many versions of these songs, and like when they're a little bit different, they stick out.
I noted the melt from this show. I think that similarly, like they're just like, I don't feel like there's a demarcation line in this tour of like from here everything was outstanding, but I do feel like
Yeah.
there is a vibe shift as they move into July. They see the light at the end of the tunnel. They've promoted Hoist. They've been on tour. They're going to get like some very well-deserved rest after making an album, playing a killer New Year's run, promoting an album, touring throughout the spring. And they're just like, let's leave it all out on the stage for the next 2 weeks and just balls to the wall, and we will be out, we will be on vacation, but like, let's make sure that these shows rule. There's a lot of big fish shows that are about to happen, and this show 7-3 is a little bit overlooked.
Mhm.
But I think the Bowie, I think the Melt, you're absolutely right. I mean, Melt is one of my MVPs of the overall tour. It's played a lot, but like, it really kind of stretches and expands in a way that we won't necessarily hear it do until later in the 90s again. But it's kind of at its apex of what demented monstrosity music it's capable of doing, similar to like what Bowie's about to become in November.
Yeah,
I liked
they
this show
keep
a
getting
lot
weirder.
too.
Mm-hmm.
Yeah,
Sorry,
they
Meg.
definitely get weirder. Yeah, I was just gonna say this show is like it's a perfect example of like the songs that were getting the treatment this year. You've got like a great Bowie, like you were said, it gets so fast and metal. This is like your King Giz moment. It's like punishing. It's really intense. And then you have like set two that opens with a secret signal. It's like they start with a dough sound. It's just like it's funny. And then the split open and out. It's one of my top jams of the tour. It's super exploratory, and they end to go back into the closing riff and just like shred it, just tear it apart. And then they have the Antelope that's like incredibly intense. It was released on From the Archives. So these like split open and melt Antelope and Bowie and a Reba with Over the Rainbow in the middle of it. This is just a real like classic 94 show, I think.
Yeah. It really is, and it's sort of like for all the reasons you said. Like, it's toward the end. They're kind of like getting out there, and getting closer to home, but also just, I don't know, these things are all evolving in real time, which is cool to listen to. I think that's one
Mhm.
of the biggest things you can see. Um, I want to just go back. Can I just go back quickly to the 616 show from Minneapolis?
Please, yeah.
The To me, the stash, so like, you listen to a bunch of stashes, and then I think that's where you start to hear like a little bit of steps forward, or different things than you hear in like the, four before this or whatever, or after. But that really stuck out to me in a show that has a bunch of really good stuff in it. But I wanted to just point out that stash because I think like there were so many that were good, but it just feels like they're all good, but this one had something a little different that I liked.
Yeah, I mean, this show has the very first ever type 2 Down disease. It's kind of hidden, like a lot of these shows are. I think that this is one of those tours that would reward a listener who wanted to listen to the entire tour. If you gave yourself the time
Yeah.
and said, like, I think Spring, as we noted when we covered it back in
200 years ago.
back in March, that tour takes a bit of time to get ramped up and then is really cool in May. This tour builds off of where the band left off, following the Bomb Factory, following the Wiltern, following the festival in somewhere in California, some bay. I'm blanking on it right now.
Laguna Seca.
Laguna Seca.
Oh
Thank you very
yeah,
much.
famous dead venue.
This picks up on that, and you have a show like 616 that has a really good stash in set 1, an Antelope that's really good in set 2, Forbin's Mockingbird, Kung, Forbin or Mockingbird, Disease, Jammed Out, Into Contact, In a Big Black Furry Creature from Mars, Purple Rain, Hold Your Head Up, Golgi, and then an encore that's without microphones, Ginseng, Amazing Grace, and then a Good Times, Bad Times. Like, it's just very, very, very classic Fish, but also very experimental Fish. And it kind of gets me to some things that I noticed about this. And I think it's a theme we have to cover when we talk about this. There were 4 instances of full sets that I had to list as best jams because they don't really stop. And it's 617 from Eagles Ballroom in Milwaukee, the OJ show. 622
Love that.
Set 2 from Columbus, which was released as Live Fish 10. 713 Patterson, New Jersey, which should absolutely be released. Kevin Shapiro, not until you release 725.99, but shortly thereafter. And then 716 from Sugarbush, Live Fish 02. These are full sets where you just press play, you don't let up. And especially the first two, the 617 and 622, this is a move that is almost like a throwback to the Roxy, but this is a move where Fish is not jamming out songs, but they're kind of jamming within their songs, and they're figuring out ways that there's like connecting points within a Mike's Groove and within a song like Tweezer, within old school songs like Kung and Iculus. They're figuring out ways to where are the threads between our songs that we can just make them all like a gigantic mashup. And that aspect of Fish is going to be gone. Like we're like the Tweezer fests are a novelty now. When the band plays them,
Yeah.
like it's a huge novelty. You think about MPP 2014, Deer Creek 2021, Forum 2021. These are rare occurrences. But back then, there's this combination of ESP and like a full understanding of who the other people are and how their songs all kind of blend together, that they're just showing off in such a cool way.
I think that's one of the reasons why this tour earns its spot is because of those sets. You put them on and you cannot turn them off. Like they're just, the flow is absolutely incredible. Like you're talking about, Brian, it feels, I like that you said ESP because it does feel like they're just communicating on another level. And it's so fun too. They just sound like they're having so much fun. I think that 622 show is just, that second set is unbelievable. It's got to be one of the best Mike's Grooves ever. Like you've got the Simple in there, and I love like the baby Simple when they're just like screaming and yelling, and it's like this new thing that they don't know like what it's going to be yet. Like if you love Simple as a song and just like as a jam vehicle, you must listen to the 94 Simples because they're just so fascinating to hear it like what it is when it first comes out and what it becomes. And then they go into Iculus in this version. Like it's just, yeah, these sets they're amazing.
And you have several famous shows in 1 week, you know,
I know.
like
Right.
it's just
Yeah,
crazy. And from the tape trading days, like, you know, these are tapes that were like 618 has kind of become more famous over time, but the 611 show, because we didn't like have as many soundboards then as we did in the early
Mhm.
90s, because they started to kind of like limit those patches, and you know that was on radio, right? So 611 is like you had to have that, and that you enjoy it. Like there's highlights there, but then you have the 617 show, then you have 618, then you have 622, then you have 626. Like these are like all kind of like legendary, and they were in a 10-day period. It's pretty crazy. I don't think 611 is particularly legendary. It just, the sound quality was so different that everyone was like excited. I mean, it's really fun, but
It's like the
can I ask you
closest
guys?
thing to a greatest hits Fish show also.
Yeah,
Mhm.
the You Enjoy Myself jam is fun.
Yeah.
So the OJ show, like we got to like think about 1994 here. So did anyone in the
Crazy.
audience understand that why they kept saying OJ?
I mean, we were watching it. Like I remember watching that whole thing happen. Like I have memories of watching that on TV that night. So like,
But not at a concert venue.
right, but it
We didn't have a
happened
phone.
early. Didn't it happen like in the afternoon? I thought it happened like right after school because I was
Oh,
in
it did.
school. And I feel like I remember
Hmm.
going home and it was like on in the
I
afternoon.
see. So this was later in. Okay, so
I
maybe
I
people
think
already did.
so.
I
And I
got
was
the
in
impression that it was like unfolding while they were playing, which I guess doesn't make
was
sense
in
time-wise.
California. I don't know that, we would have to do some research to find that out, but I do feel like you might have known by
Okay,
then.
got it.
I don't
That
know.
makes sense. I think you're probably right.
There was definitely the one Wook going around telling people about it, and everyone else is like, yeah, okay, sure.
Okay, buddy. OJ,
Whatever.
great. I love this show though. It's so fun.
It's crazy. It's
It's
I
so
mean,
wild.
crazy.
I think the idea of the band doing this after watching this on TV backstage when the audience doesn't know is a bit of a better Like that's a
Right.
better mythology that like the audience is like, why the hell do they keep singing about OJ? But I think you're right. And Forbin77 says, I think I don't want to misinterpret what you're saying, but you're saying we were in the Sigma Chi house in the late afternoon.
Yeah, I think it was
I'm
then.
guessing that means that you were watching this on TV and then went to the show. Clarify if I'm wrong with my assumption there, but that would make it like funnier in the moment.
Yeah.
Like if you were
Yeah,
there
I
and you
agree.
knew what they were singing about, like you're probably like that much more. You're like, holy shit, that's hilarious. So
Yeah.
the pursuit
Yeah.
begins. Christian just posted.
Yes, someone brought us the data.
5:56 p.m. The California Highway Patrol begins pursuit of Simpsons and AC.
Is that California time?
So that's California time. That means
Hmm.
just around showtime.
Oh, so I was totally wrong.
And as Forbin's saying here, they were watching the OJ chase. So it sounds as though the audience, at least like some people in the audience, had a chance to be clued in. Because you're right. If it was 2024, your phone would start buzzing that there is
Yeah.
a manhunt, and everybody would know what's going on, and the band
Yeah.
probably wouldn't know. So it'd be the
Yeah.
Right.
reverse. Would be
They-
this
they
like
have
big
to know,
event that
right.
just happened and or is happening, and the
Yeah.
band doesn't know. But this could potentially be the reverse for some people.
Okay, we need to hear from somebody who is at this show now if they knew or not.
Yeah, I looked through all the reviews and I did not see anyone talking about that aspect of it.
Yeah.
Okay, so can we talk about a couple shows?
Yes.
Yeah, let's do
Um,
it.
I just want to talk about the Man because it's 1.9 miles from my house, and I realized after we moved here, I'm involved with the Man, as I've told you guys, but I realized last year that I actually can hear all the concerts from the Man at night. Like when I take my dogs out at like 10 o'clock, I can hear the music. Not well enough to know who it is, but I like can hear concerts going, which is crazy. But so, okay, so this was the first summer that Fish played UIC, the Columbus Vet, Holmdel, SPAC, Finger Lakes, Sugarbush. They played a lot of those on Horde or open for Santana, but in terms of headliners. And they played the Man as a headliner the year before in the summer of 93. But, you know, it's a 14,000 person venue. And the fact that they played there in the summer of 93 and summer of 94 kind of blows my mind. But the Bowie into If I Could is just a master class on using a ballad after a jam. It's just like they did that so well this tour with Fast Enough for You and If I Could, and like the way that the ballads are used is just perfect. I feel like this
Life Boy.
94, 95 was like Life Boy. It was quite kind of the peak of that. So it's
Those are also
93.
really good ballads. Like they didn't have as many, but they were so good.
They were so good. Yeah, exactly. They were just like there was like one on each album or something.
Yeah,
Two,
I
maybe.
know. And they were really good.
They're powerful. So Fish first headlined the Man in 93. So is 93 Fish equal to 24 Goose? How do you feel about that, Brian? Or Meg?
Wait,
Either.
can you say that again?
93 Fish, because Goose first headlined the Man in 2024. So we're looking at these career arcs. Where does 93 Fish equal 24 Goose, or is that just a Man headliner overlap?
I feel like you're doing like a CNN/ESPN thing where you're trying to get me to say one very complicated thing in like 2 words. I can't give you a yes or no answer on this. I mean, I think yes, the trajectory evolution of moving into venues makes sense. I think it's complicated. You wouldn't let me have my digression, so I can't give you the full answer.
I love that. I mean, when if Goose plays MSG, next year, it would line up as the same as when Fish played in their 11th year. So that trajectory, like you're saying, Brian, would line up. But yeah, I don't know if I'm prepared to make that kind of a statement either. I need to really do some research. I can't just do these things off the cuff.
Has Goose had their August 93 month yet? Would you argue?
It's a good question. I don't know. I mean, I don't think I don't. Not that I know of, but we might not know until we have more data, right?
I think we
I
need
think
more
you're right.
time because there was a personnel shift that I think affected their musical trajectory, and so I think they've had a bit of a reset. And
Yeah,
so
I
I
mean,
think
I
we need
just
more time.
Like I
just
think
countered
winter
my own
22,
question.
June 24 could be long term, because like the thing about
Mhm.
August 93 is that it cracks open what's
Yeah.
possible, and then you start to see that here in summer 94 for Fish. I don't know if we've seen that full. See, it's complicated, RJ. It's very
Mhm.
complicated. But
I
7-1
just
is a great show. The Harry Hood from that show is absolutely beautiful.
yeah, the hood is great too. I counter my own point by saying that we don't know yet. But and someone on who's watching on Instagram said we were having such a nice chat, which is great.
Thank you.
Okay, so
Thank you.
I'm just gonna talk about one more show real quick.
Sure.
The 619 show, that set 2 is just great. Like, it's just the flow is great. The Antelope, and then If I Could, which is perfect, and the Reba into this like kind of jammed out Makasupa and Squirming Coil. It's just like a really that I felt like that show and that set in particular was just really really awesome. But Brian, I had when in my notes, you guys know Reprise played the 713, the Big Birch show earlier this year.
Yes.
But my only notes on 713 are, how is this not a live Fish release?
How is it not released? It's insane.
Makes no sense.
There are 4 shows from this tour I have as like how we're, if we're just going to keep releasing 94 shows, which we should, like 94, 95, 97, 99, and if you include 725, which we should, deserve more releases. And like, you almost can't release enough shows at this point in time to just like catch
Mhm.
up with what needs to be out there. 713 is one of those, like, they've got to have like a spreadsheet of like, up next, maybe if we need money desperately, only after we get through the creme de la creme will we release these shows. Like, these are for like the diehard fans in like
Right.
2097 who are still hanging on and like, oh my god, they released some random 93 show. But 713 has to be in tier 1.
Has to.
It's
Yeah.
got so much color, and the tape isn't that great. Sorry.
Yeah.
Like, we need we need like a softening out of the edges of that show. That's a killer show.
Yeah.
with just like, I mean,
Yeah.
Bluegrass, Big Black Furry Creature from Mars, Cavern Wilson Cavern, an insane possum, an insane melt.
my
Like,
God.
you're just in Fish. Phil C has it here. This is really what it is. A Grateful Dead style
Ooh.
June,
Ooh.
July 94 box set that's like $600. I would 100% buy that.
That would be so
Yeah.
sick. Yeah. Yeah, this show has it all. It's got the flow. It's perfect flow. I also love the kind of lore of this show, where the stories of like how there were folding chairs and then people were like throwing them aside during the show, and like some of them landed on stage, and like the show is it's great. Cavern Wilson Cavern. That's so fun.
It really
Yeah.
is.
This
Yeah.
Tweezer Fest, it's just so much swagger. Like this tweezer, listening back to it too, I kind of forgot. It's like not perfect, but the slight mistakes, they kind of like turn into an artistic choice. It just has a lot of like uniqueness to this tweezer jam. It's fucking sick.
Yeah.
And then it turns into like a jazz thing, and they go into Julius. Like this show is really great. Perfect Slave at the end. Oh,
Well, I think that's where they were at in a lot of cases, was let mistakes, like a mistake is only a
Mm.
mistake when you acknowledge the mistake.
Yes.
If you just play through it and you embrace the mistake, and you kind of go where the music takes you rather than try to control it, you end up with something like Big Birch, where
Yeah.
a mess up actually turns out to be benefit. It'll happen later in the year, and I don't want to foreshadow a future episode too much, but like the funky bitch from Columbia that's 30 minutes long happens because Fishman misses the cue at the end of the song to end the song.
Yes.
Other
I
than his
love
jam.
that.
It's pretty great.
Yeah, that's like what I do when I'm dancing. If I like make a mistake, then I just act like it's intentional and go that way.
Yeah.
In some ways, it like becomes something cooler
Part
than
of
it would
the-
have been originally. Yeah.
All right, Brian, give us a show.
All right, I'm going to go with one of my favorite shows of the entire tour, the entire year, a show that should get greater recognition and should be released, which is 7/2/94. So we bookended this 7-1 and 7-3 with some of RJ's recommendations. This goes to Phil's
Mm,
point of releasing a full box set because all these shows are great. 7294 is from Homedale. Solid first set. Beautiful, beautiful. Down with Divided Sky, Fast Enough for You, Tweezer, Lifeboy, Sparkle, Tweezer Reprise to end the set, which is a really cool feature. The second set, though, I mean, this Mike's Groove is one of my favorite jam segments of the entire summer. Mike's song, simple. Mike's song, I apologize for this. Yerushalayim Shel Zahav. That's as close as you're going to get to me to pronounce that correctly.
yeah,
I
it's
apologize.
challenging.
Into Hydrogen, into Weekapaw Groove, and then we end the set with McGrupp, Maze, Sample, Slave, Highway to Hell, and then a Rift Encore. I just have always found the second set to sound like Summer 94 Fish in the best way. I put it on and I immediately hear this thrill and excitement from a fan base that a year earlier was seeing the band in half-filled amphitheaters or in
Mhm.
theaters, and now is seeing how big this thing is getting, and how, how much more prominence there is. And at this time, like, the band probably knows that they're playing MSG this year and they're
Yeah.
playing within the market right now. And they kind of know that this is something that's coming for the future for them. It's just a really tight show. It's got some jamming to it, but it's just got a lot of really just that ESP musicianship we were talking about, that I absolutely love. And I absolutely, I can't get enough of. And I think that this show would do a lot of fans well to hear if they have not heard it and to hear it in soundboard quality.
Yeah, the Fast Enough for You is so good. It has such a blistering peak. It's really, really great. It stands out. I also, this Weekapaw is insane. Like, if you need to run through a brick wall, you can put this on. And a perfect McGrupp too.
Yeah, really, really good McGrupp. It's a jam charted McGrupp, which is worth noting. I'm just checking here. Phil C asked if that is the first Mike's Simple. My gut tells me that it is not, that the first is earlier in the year. So I'm just doing a quick fact check. The first Mike's into Simple is 5/27/94. From San Francisco, and then you get 6/17/94 from Eagles Ballroom, 6/22/94 from Veterans Memorial Auditorium in Columbus, and then 7/2 into Simple is the fourth one ever. But close. We're in that
Really
era
close.
where certain people are going to say, "Where's my hydrogen?"
Yeah. And it's, I mean, when this tour starts, the 14 is like the third time Simple's ever played. So it's
Yes.
brand new. Brand new.
What about you? What's another show you got?
Well, I have a question about, I want to ask your opinion about the 626 show.
Sure.
This is the Game Hoist show, obviously. And I'm just wondering, like, how do you think that show stands up? Like,
So
is it too novelty? Is it just good or interesting because of the setup of them playing Hoist and Gamehenge?
So I think that there's a bit of a novelty to it. I have this on, like, I think this should be officially released because I think from a novelty standpoint, it
Yeah.
is, I think it's one of the more important structural shows that they've ever played. It's
Mhm.
such a cool concept, and for them to be playing in a part of the country that they don't return to a state they don't return to. I think that this was kind of off the beaten path of the tour, and there's, just a snooze you lose quality to this.
Mhm.
There's become this almost Pearl Jam started doing this in the 2010s where you'd see them in random places, like in Moline, Illinois in 2014. They covered No Code, their 1996 album, in full. And then I think they've done it a few
Cool.
other times for a few other albums. And like Springsteen toured Playing the River for all of 2016. And they're like, bands have taken this approach of, like, we'll play an old album in full. Wilco does this at their festivals, and it's inadvertently really, it's cool. But, like, part of the reason I think you go and see a lot of really quality live bands tends to be that they take songs you've heard in the studio and they expand on them, or they match them up with other songs. And so there is something slightly deflating about hearing just like track by track of the album. But I think it almost was like at the time, them poking fun at themselves in a way, because they were promoting
Yeah.
Hoist so much and they were playing all the Hoist songs, that why don't we give this crowd Gamehenge, first Gamehenge in 15 months. And in addition to that, we'll give them our new record. And you get this really wild encore of a bunch of bust outs of Old Home Place, first time since March 20, the first ever Old Home Place. First Gamehenge since March 22nd, 93. First Tube since April 12th, 1993. Plus An Amazing Grace and a Fire Encore. It's just like, it
Yeah.
gives you enough for like the stat stuffers to really walk away happy. And I do think it's a quality version of Gamehenge. It's really
Mhm.
well narrated. It would stack up with 322 and 7894 as one that you should hear. But what are your thoughts? Have I convinced you of any of your doubts, or are you singing its praises?
No, I was on the same feeling. I have it on the should be released just because of the historical importance of it. I think if they wanted to play, like, say, my favorite Fish album, Rift, from beginning to end, I would be 100% here for that. Like, that would be so much fun. But yeah, I think it's in the context of this tour, I think that there's so many other shows that work so much better, and just are more interesting to listen to. But I do think that this show, paired with the 7/8 show, influenced a lot of us in the moment to think that we were going to get Gamehenge for years. And I think that it was a real mindfuck. Like, because it's interesting, like when you were talking about in the beginning about how the band was kind of saying goodbye to like older Fish and playing Gamehenge in this way that they couldn't, or they weren't going to anymore. It's interesting to me because I don't know why they ever thought they couldn't do that again, or why it had to be this big production. Like, I wonder if they actually think that. I think if they just came and played Gamehenge, like no puppetry, no big set production, people would be fucking thrilled. So, like, I just am curious as to why they didn't for so long. And I think that in the moment, it was really intense. We really thought we were going to hear it again, like all through like 95, 96, and 97 is when I like started to give up. But we really thought we were going to hear it again.
Yeah, I think that's a really good point. Like you had this you had this it was hard to probably tell in the moment that this band was going to undergo such a seismic change, that they would be touring Europe multiple times, that they would reinvent their own sound, that they'd play a show like 12/31/95, that like within 3 years, which 3 years before they're playing colleges and frat parties and touring around the country 3 to 4 times a year. Within that time frame, going to the future, they're going to sound in a manner that nobody would have predicted at that point in time. And they're going to do things that take this small community and blow it up in a good way. But I think that like smallness, that secret element to Fish, where like if you were a Fish fan and you knew other Fish fans, you were in on this secret that most other people had no idea about. You still feel that to an extent now, but it is so much bigger. And you go to a Fish show and it feels like a big event. They're almost saying goodbye to this here, but in the moment, I can't imagine that people really recognize that this is actually an end and not a sustained artistic example of who we are.
Yeah, even when the scene changed, like in 95 after Jerry died, like I still think we thought they were gonna hold on to a lot of that kind of stuff, and I still think we thought we were gonna get it. So every show you went to, if it felt even slightly special, you felt like you were gonna get it, and you felt like you deserved it, which is a fucked up way to feel, I know, but that's how people felt.
Yeah, I mean it's part of the. I think that's part of the joy of discovering a band like this. Is like
Yeah,
MTV is not telling you necessarily to listen to this band. The radio is not telling you to listen to this band. So if you are listening to this band, it's because you're in on a secret,
mhm.
and the experience you're having, and the experience you're having when you go and see any other band. you know you still get this. Like, I went and saw the War on Drugs in the National last weekend, and it was a great show. but it had nothing compared to what I experienced with Fish in Mexico and at Dick's. Like, they're at a point now where they're doing things that, you know, these venues they're playing at are just like churning artists and churning out shows. And a lot of bands are just coming through and playing their hits and then some songs, and people are having a good time. Don't get me wrong. But then Fish is coming through and being like, how do we reinvent what it actually means to play a rock concert in the 1990s? And how do
Yeah.
we do it without a lot of like big brand support and all this sort of stuff? And so you get a show like 626, you get a show like 7/8, you get a show like 7/13, that really mines the depths of who Fish is, and is a great example of
Mhm.
why their fan base is so dedicated, which is something I'll get to when we do our big takeaway, but also why mass culture is just never going to get them.
Yeah, I agree. It's cool to think about that in terms of their history and like reflecting back on it because you think so differently when you've actually like hindsight, you know?
Yeah. Yeah. There's in the moment versus in hindsight is always going to be different with this sort of stuff, you know?
Yeah.
Um, One show I want to highlight is another show I think should be officially released. 7/6/94 from Montreal.
Mm.
This is one of my favorite shows from the year, which I've said a couple of times. There's a lot of really good shows from this year, but this is one of my absolute favorites. I just want to list the big Fish songs that you get across this show because
It's
it's kind of
crazy.
outstanding.
Yeah.
Llama, Fluffhead, Reba, David Bowie, Tweezer, Chalk Dust Torture, Harry Hood, Tweezer Reprise. Now, that's not the whole show, but like across the entire
Insane.
show, you get massive Fish songs. Like some of the biggest Fish songs that have ever been written. These are songs that at some point have been called upon to hold down an entire set. You know,
Yeah.
any great Fish set has to usually have one of these songs up until like 1997. And, you know, so they're always going to be, these are always going to be in the rotation. You get a really wild, really cool version of Reba, a really cool, nearly 20-minute David Bowie to close the set. One of my favorite tweezers of the entire tour.
So good.
I have this one and the 610 tweezer from Red Rocks as my two notable jams. But you get a lot of segues. You get a really wild Big Black Furry Creature from Mars, Sample in a Jar, Big Black Furry Creature from Mars. I didn't even mention Harry Hood. You get Harry Hood in
Yeah.
this show. You're just like, you're getting hit over the head with really maximalist Fish playing in a really powerful way, showing a lot of dexterity and doing this
Mhm.
thing where like song after song after song, you think you've reached the apex of the show and they've figured out a way to take it up another notch.
This show's amazing. Fluffhead in spot 2, and it's just such an incredible version. The build is amazing, but this Reba really like stopped me in my tracks. I actually looked through all like RJ's list of live baits, and I looked through everything. Was like, why is this not remastered? Like it's really beautiful. It's such a groove, and Trey just goes off so big in it, and it made me a little emotional hearing it because I get very like upset when people talk about how Trey can't play as fast as he used to, and like he's not as great as he used to be or whatever. But like hearing the way that he plays in this Reba, like you get it. Like it's just so unbelievably phenomenal. It's a must hear for sure. And I love this tweezer too. It's definitely like a stop on the way to the banger tweezer. It's just like awesome journey. 2001 quotes and that huge peak with the 2001 quotes in the peak, and then like the slowed down funky ending with the piano flourishes. Great. And then a huge big 4-song encore too.
Yeah, Old Home Place is sticking around at this point. Nellie Kane, both of those acoustic without microphones. Memories is played for. This is okay. So it's played 42 times. This was the last time it was ever played. It was a bust out of 70
wow.
shows. It was primarily played between 1990 and 1993 and then put on the shelf until this show and has not been played since then. And then Funky Bitch, Sending Everyone Home, with their blues rock quota hit.
Would you have left early, Brian?
No,
During
I
the
would have
Funky
stuck
Bitch?
around. I'm okay with a funky bitch encore. It's just, you know, when the blues songs come at me midway through the second set or deep in a
Not
first set,
good.
when I'm ready for the jams, I'm just gonna go and grab a water and use the
Some
restroom
water.
and take a walk around the concourse and hang out and, you know, channel positive energy rather than, you know, criticizing every decision the band makes. I'm trying to see. I think that those are my notable shows. Is there anything else that you want to hit from a show standpoint?
The only thing I want to talk about, not necessarily as a show, but I think the Sugar Bush show is pretty special. Just being the end of the tour, and I just think that hood really blew me away. It stopped me in my tracks, and maybe it's just because I was coming to the end of my 1994 listening journey, and I've been listening to a lot of Fish this week, preparing for this episode, and I knew I was on the last show, and listening to this hood, it gets so quiet and beautiful and patient, and then it has that like just wild shredding, and it's just an excellent version of hood. So I really think this show it's pretty awesome.
This was a pretty important show for me in my education and evolution as a Fish fan. This came
Oh,
out as
really?
live. Yeah, this came out as Live Fish '02, and I
Hmm.
that throughout the fall of 2001, I got the Live Fish series in order. So the first show I heard of it was 12/14/95. I had no concept going into the tour that December '95 meant anything in Fish
Oh, that's
history.
awesome.
And at this point, I'd probably heard 6 to 7 Fish shows. So I was
Hmm.
very, very, very green. And I was at a point with the Fish was on hiatus. I was at a point with any band where how deep can you go with this? Like, is it going to be a band that defines your life, or is it just something that you're interested in? And I remember hearing this show, and specifically the Catapult Antelope, and just feeling like I'd heard Run Like an Antelope before, but I'd never heard it like this. And you
Hmm.
hear this band they know they're walking out on stage for the last set before October, and they've got this 2.5 month period in time off. They've reached a level of success where they can take these extended breaks and know that they're going to be okay. And all they have to think about and worry about is their own creative engines staying fresh and their own inspiration. And so you hear them just leaving everything on the stage,
Yeah.
and the yelling back and forth at each other, the chaos, the fact that Trey is running around the stage with a megaphone. It was just like, as a 16-year-old hearing this band for really the first time during that period in my life, and hearing them play a set like this, it reshaped what I thought was possible with this band, and is part of the reason why I'm still just, trying to figure out where the bottom is with Fish so many years later. So it's a great call. Obviously has been officially released, but if you have not listened to that show in some time, I just remember, I just recommend going and firing up that second set. It rules. It just rules.
Yeah, I didn't know that that was like one of the first full shows you've heard. That's really cool. It's just such a classic vibe, and I love you can hear them like being back in Vermont, and they talk about that, and it just has this kind of like homecoming feeling to it. I think it's really special.
Yeah. And they did it a year earlier with the well, you've had a couple moments like that where like this band goes national and then comes back and re-embraces the Northeast in a really cool way.
Yeah.
You think like 1230 and 1231/93, where they've played this big year,
Mm.
huge year of Fish. And then they come home, they make Hoist, and then they do this New Year's Eve run, and they play in Portland and Worcester. And those are two of the best all-time Fish shows ever. And they feel like what you're talking about here. I think the one thing that this show steps forward, because you felt it as well on 5/8/93 in New Hampshire.
Hmm.
I think the one thing that this show does that pushes that concept forward is that it's at Sugarbush. It has that festival feel to it. And they come back a year later, play 2 shows there. And those 2 shows are kind of the can we throw this non-venue camping festival? Like we have it in like the structure of the ski hill. Can we do this in a place where like we expand the amount of people that are going to be here? So from 7/16/94 to 8/16/96, this is a band that's going to go from playing small theaters and still having this secret about them to playing to almost 100,000 people on a decommissioned Air Force base. Like it's an insane period of growth and evolution they're right in the middle of. And the Sugar Bush show is kind of like it's right at the crux of that.
I know. It's a really thrilling time. I think that's a huge part of what I loved about listening to this tour again, was kind of remembering what was happening for them at this time. It just must have been so fascinating for them.
I think it's worth noting Forbin 77 just outed, kind of following up on what I had said. He was 20. He had the same effect and nothing else like it. Trey was 29. The band was 29, 30 at this point in time. Like that gap between 20 and 30 feels really big, but like in hindsight, like you're young and figuring things out. And for some people, they're going to achieve their goals and their dreams. And for other people, they're going to, like the 20s are kind of when a lot of things are defined for the path of your life, and for Phish, what has been defined is that they went after this crazy dream and it worked out in a way that like is beyond anyone's wildest imagination. But for everyone who's in the show, you're going through your own personal evolution and you're seeing this band that you're so attached to do the same thing. There's got to be a sense of pride and a sense of ownership to all of that, I think was why over the next 5 to 10 years, there were disagreements and rifts between the veteran fans who had been there into 1994 and everyone who jumped on board afterwards as a result of how good this stuff was. But it is really wild to think like that whole community is in their 20s, early 30s at most, seeing this thing blow up in a way that I don't think anybody would have predicted 2 years prior.
Yeah, it's so wild to think about, because even like me being 17 in 94 when I saw them, I thought I was still in the beginning because I saw them at a small theater in Grand Rapids. And I think watching them grow within that next year was pretty insane. And I can't imagine what it had been like if you'd been there for a while.
Yeah, I mean, seeing them at Nectar's and in legitimate bars and empty frat houses, and then to see them here and they've got it all. So we've talked a lot about this tour. I think it's been deserving of the time. What is your big takeaway on this tour before we close down tour number 9, summer 1994?
I think this is the year that Phish becomes the Phish we know today. I think the commitment to being a band that explores outside the confines of a song regularly is established this year. And, they've obviously jammed before, but this is the year when it starts to become like really consistent and more wild. And I do think this is the last like homegrown, old school Phish vibey tour. Like we talked about earlier, all the storytelling, all the lore. I think everything changes after this year in terms of the audience and how they're viewed and kind of what they become after this. It's the, right up to the peak, the first one.
Yeah, I think that's it. I wrote, building off the last 2 years, Phish had found a formula that would bring fans back year after year in droves. Near obsession would be the bar for entry. What defined them, however, was the fact that over the next 4 years, they'd shapeshift in ways no one at the time could have predicted and continue to this day. For most bands, Summer 94 is the best that they could ever dream of. If reached, they stay within that sound forever. For Phish, this was but a passing phase. I think that like the thing that blows me away about this tour is that within 6 months, they don't sound like this band anymore.
Yeah.
And every goal that they hit, they seek out what's next. And that question is always, to me, the defining, like all these stepping stones along the way would have been any other band's peak moment. And the thing that separates Phish is that they hit it and they live in it and they embrace it, but then they very quickly are like, cool, what are we doing next? And there's something like, from a creative standpoint, to not get bored and have everything be like process driven. Instead, they leave failure and chance and risk open in a manner that will define them going forward.
Yeah, what's next? You know, they always want to know.
They always want to know, and we want to know too, and you do as well, so you can all get prepared. We will be back with tour number 8 next week. Different date,
Hmm.
different time.
Hmm.
We have some life complexities next week. We keep all thinking that like things are going to slow down and we're going to be able to just like hang out and podcast all the time, but life gets in the way. We are going to be coming at you on Wednesday afternoon
Hmm.
at 2 or at 4 or 4:30. I don't know. 4.
I don't know.
4.
I think 4.
I
We'll
think
see.
4. We'll know. We'll tell you. Meg, why don't you tell us what tour we are going to be talking about next week for the fans?
This is a big shakeup. I hope everybody's ready. This
I think that a lot
is
of people are going to be pissed at us for
You
having this
do?
above Summer '94, and I'm here to defend myself while also saying I understand your sentiment, but go on.
But I also I encourage that. I want people to call us and tell us why they think fall 2021 should not be our 8th top tour of all time. I have so many feelings about why this tour is where it is, and I think we were all in agreement when we drafted it here. But the fan vote had it at 16. So it's a big, big jump up to 8. And you know, next week you have to come and listen to us defend this. So it's exciting. It's a big ask for us, but we're gonna do it.
I love making lists. Meg is on like 16 of my lists.
I love your
that are
lists.
books, movies, albums, fish jams, goose jams when they decide to jam. And one thing I've learned from list making is that there is a move that you have to make because the list as a static form
Yes.
is not like the list has to be there to inspire discourse. When you send the
Mhm.
list to a friend, you want them to come back with what the fuck is that doing there? And so you always have to have something in your top 10 that elicits a what the fuck is going on there so that you can get into that conversation, because the conversation is the interesting part. We're going to get into this next week. I agree with you. I think that we got this right. I think that we are going to prove our case as I'm looking at my top jams of the tour list for this tour.
Can't believe you already have your notes. I'm very annoyed about that.
It is
Just
bigger
jealous.
than any other tour we've covered.
Oh, see, that's fascinating.
It is there's more
Mm.
going on in this tour than any tour we have covered thus far. And there is the reflection on The Secret, and there is a reflection on the old school gimmicks that got them to that point in time, told through a band that has seen everything and doesn't have anything left to prove, but decides to go for it. And so we're going to get into it. We're going to talk about it. I'm very excited. It's an amazing tour, but I hope you all bring your thoughts. I hope you all send us
Mhm.
voicemails. I think people like Phil C, who I know was very happy with the way that I hope was very happy with the way we covered this tour and where Summer '95 was, and clearly had an amazing experience. I hope you bring hot takes and opinions and pushback,
Yes.
because I encourage it. I don't want to push any of that away. I think that
No, me too.
discussion is important. This will be our last non-90s tour on this
Yeah.
list, which is, I
Last
think,
on
accurate as
1.0.
well.
Mhm.
But I do think that this is I'm very excited to talk about this, because man, when you go back to this tour,
It
I'll
smokes.
talk about this as we go through it, but I don't think there's any tour we've covered thus far where the band sounds so locked in from the start, so
Mm.
full of a singular sound, and then not 10 days later, just as locked in, but playing very different music. It's wild what
wild.
happens across this tour.
I would also say, not to give everything away, but that the context of this tour is equally as important to the future of Phish as any of the other tours
Yes.
we've talked about.
Agree with that completely. And we will get into that and more when we see you all next Wednesday at I think 4 p.m.
We're not really
to
sure.
cover
We'll let you know.
fall 2021. If you can't be there for the live show, you know that we'll post the podcast shortly after. But please send in your voicemails, write us an email, write us a review, give us your thoughts on fall 2021 and on the overall top 25 tours as it continues onwards. We're getting close to the end.
I know. I'm kind of sad, but it's exciting too because these top tours are awesome.
They're awesome, and they also take up a lot of time to listen to and potentially get right. So I think
I am actually really. I've been listening to so much Phish this year. It's been awesome.
A lot of it. All right, guys. We hope you guys have an amazing weekend. We will see you all once again here on Wednesday on HF Pod. Thank you so much. Take care of each other.
Thanks, everybody.